Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Thursday and welcome to our Edge user group for October. Before we get into the technical side of things and into the presentation, I'm just going to give folks a few seconds to settle in, take a virtual seat, but we're excited to have you guys here. One of these days, music. All right.
It's okay. It's quite all right. I was thinking about that, how we mentioned that there might be some theme music this time around, and it's okay. It's okay. Would it have been spooky? Would we have done something a little spooky with Halloween coming up?
Because it's
I don't know,
October.
Drew. We could have an acapella IESC going.
Oh my gosh.
Ooh, October acapella. Oh, okay. So for those of you that have already joined the webinar, that was Jasmine who came up with this idea. We'll see how that develops.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, welcome in, guys. I'm seeing a pretty full room. We're really excited to have you guys here on behalf of our IESC and ACRO International team for our Edge user group for October. For those of you who haven't joined us before, we're going to be using our platform called Zoom Webinar. So you'll notice that your mics and your video are automatically muted and disabled just to prevent any interruptions during the presentation. But with that said, we want to make sure that you guys are engaging with us. So please feel free to use our chat function on the bottom to let us know where you're joining from and just to ask any questions. We also have our Q&A feature on the bottom as well, where you can ask questions. And I know at the end, we'll have time to go over those and answer them. And if you have any technical questions, please feel free to use the chat as well and message me directly. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and pass the mic over to Drew. And guys, thank you for being here. Here you go.
Thanks, Christina. So one of the things that Christina mentioned right in there was if you have questions, put them in the chat. Questions that we can help you out with from a technical perspective, those go right into the chat. Christina will be able to help out with any of that. But for questions that you're looking for us to address, to really dive a little bit deeper into, put those over in the Q&A. That's going to allow us to queue up that list and we'll have everyone be able to look at that throughout. Today, as we've mentioned, it's the start of our October Edge user group. Thank you all for joining us. We've got a pretty good show in store for all of you. We've got Jasmine, we've got Shelby, we've got Robert, we've got Leslie, we've got Drew, and we've got Christina here as well. There might be a couple additional guests, but really we want to talk about all the exciting things that we've been working on here. For those of you that don't know who all of us are, I'm Drew Carlisle, the Assistant Director of Edge Development with ACRO. My colleague just over to my left, as I see her, is Jasmine Saidi Kunert, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Drew. Greetings, everybody. Happy Thursday. Yes. I'm just really happy to be here with you all today. Again, I'm Jasmine Saidi Kunert, and my role on the IESC is the chair of this wonderful group of individuals. And today I'm joined by 3 of my voting members. There are 7 voting members, but many of our group is on the road traveling to various conferences. So I have Shelby Curley, we have Leslie Aisha Clausen, and we have Robert Watkins. We put together a really robust agenda for you today. As always, we take advantage of all the questions you submit to us, and Drew and Christina compile this wonderful PowerPoint for you. For those of you who are new to today's webinar, the IESC is the International Education Standards Council. It's a group of volunteers. We are individuals who work at public or private universities or credential evaluation agencies. We come to IESC with a wealth of information based on our many years. Sorry to give ages away, but some of us have been in this field for more than a few decades. So we, I just feel it's our duty, it's the service we do to our community to pay back in this way and share this information. And we're happy to be part of the IESC that oversees the entries that are made into the electronic database of global education, EDGE. So everything you see in there goes through the vetting process of members of IESC. So the wonderful research that is done by authors who volunteer their time and contribute to EDGE, that work is then reviewed and vetted and questioned and discussed, and maybe even further research by our members. We have observers on the IESC. We also have members of ACRO staff who help us, and you've just met Drew and Christina as two. Julia Funaki and Dave Mahalia are two others. We also have fellows. These are individuals who are selected annually to come on board. They are kind of the rising stars in the field, and we love to mentor them and help them, and we then give them a great research project. So every year that we have a cohort that joins us, there are typically two, they're assigned a research project. So let's see, I don't have anything else to add. We have a lot to cover today, so what I'd like to do is pass it on back to Drew. Here you go, Drew.
Hey, thanks, Jasmine. So while I'm talking about what we're going to go over today, I want to hear from who we have with us. Tell us, are you an Edge subscriber right now? If you're not, don't forget there is a free trial available. Go to the About Edge link available within every page in Acro Edge. Is this your first user group? Many of you have been with us before, I'm willing to bet, but I'm going to guess about a third to a quarter. It's going to be the first time you've ever been here. And who are you here representing? Are you a member of an institution? Do you work at an evaluation agency? Are you affiliated with a government or a ministry in some capacity? Are you here with a law firm? I don't know. Let's give it, what, about 15 more seconds and then see what kind of response we've got. Because I'm going to tell you, we're going to go over to Cuba. A while back, we've been able to assemble a lot of information, do a full country profile update, and we actually got to do some on-the-ground primary research about Cuba, and we're real excited to share a lot of that with you. We'll be talking about a user-submitted question that got us doing some research into Austria and talking about Bologna-compliant credential advice with everything in there. There's a lot of different permutations. There's a lot of different options, and we want to be sure we reflect all of that for you with that credential advice that we are giving. In Pakistan, something that's being discussed and researched within the IESC is some updates to some grading scales. And we'll talk about some of those considerations that we're going through as we're debating this back and forth. And we'll head over to Kazakhstan as well, where there is, it's another user submitted question that got us going down this rabbit hole, talking about how particular vocational education is seen in the context of Kazakhstan and Russia and Kyrgyzstan. And it's a whole interesting little bit. I'll let Robert and Shelby get into that a little bit more later. But what are those results that we had from who's here with us?
Sure thing. Let me share it out so that folks can see for themselves. But you were pretty spot on. A lot of the folks we have joining us are indeed Edge subscribers, but 5 of the 73 who answered are not. So welcome in, guys. I'm happy to see you. Is this your first user group? About 30%. This is their first time. It's pretty awesome. And we've got 70% who have been here before. So thanks for coming back. And then finally, what segments do you represent? As usual, institutional staff make up the majority. And we got some evaluation service folks and a couple government folks. No lawyers today, though. So there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing that.
And so without, keeping it away from the information too long, I'm going to remind everyone about the bookmark feature that we have for Acro Edge. Now, all of these where I mentioned people were submitting questions, it's a feature that you can use once you've logged in. You can bookmark any of these countries, and then when we make a substantive update, you're going to get a notification that comes right out the next time you log into Edge. Red banner across the top, and it's going to say, there have been updates since you last logged in. You can click right into that. It'll take you to the screen that shows the countries that have made the updates, and you'll be able to see, like I said, new credential advice, if there's a new grading scale, anything that where the IESC voted and made a substantive change, that's going to be brought right into your inbox. So I remember that our colleague Natalie, she asked the question about Austria. So we would encourage Natalie to bookmark Austria, and then when the IESC comes around to it, it comes right into Natalie's, experience when she's logged into Edge. So you can go over to the Edge user guide. Again, that link is available on every page within Edge, and you can find out this information on how to use the bookmarks. But basically, you log in, and you click right in the upper right-hand corner of the country, and it's going to give you all that information. Please do that when you submit your questions to us, and that way you'll know exactly when the ISC has been able to answer that question. Robert, let's go to Cuba.
Sure, Drew, thanks. Basically, right now, the IESC is reviewing and about to discuss a full country profile update on Cuba. And this was prompted by the white paper that came out 2 years ago. But even further, let me take us further back than that. In February 2018, a group of 10 Acroans, myself and Melanie sort of leading the group, went to Cuba. What was interesting is that Melanie had been attempting to get this project off the ground, but the few Cuban authorities she was able to approach seemed to be not helpful, or rather more unresponsive. Yes, we'll be glad to help, and then we hear nothing more. Serendipitously, she attended a reception where she learned that a group of U.S. Graduate students from James Madison and from Georgetown were going down again on a project that turns out to have been ongoing for the last 20 years. And they're studying for master's and doctoral degrees in various disciplines, but usually surrounding something to do with Latin America, Central America, et cetera. And so we were invited to come along. And so we were able to quickly bring that together. And in February 2018, the 10 of us did go, joining these other folks. Because we wanted to stay with them, or felt because they'd invited us that we needed to stay with them, we participated in all their functions, seeking those moments when we could find them to sneak off and talk to university officials, school officials, educators, and so forth, to determine, what's going on the ground. We were working with this U.S. group, but they were working with a group of Cuban educators, and the educators were wonderful. They were absolutely helpful. And the other thing I'd say is it was serendipitous that we got there, but it was also serendipitous in the sense that it was February 2018, and it was still possible to go to Cuba for educational purposes and so on. And so we were able to go. As you know, things changed rather quickly. We actually had a presentation when we first got there about how things were about to change with the new administration in Washington in 2017, and it hadn't hit full on that early in 2018 yet. So we were very lucky. We were in two places basically, Havana and Matanzas, about an hour and a half bus ride or so outside of the city, outside of Havana. And we visited 2 or 3 institutions there, the university, obviously, of Matanzas, but also there was the medical school that was there that is not designed for Cubans, but for other nationalities. And there were 2 Americans there, by the way. And that you get the first 2 years of your pre-medical training, and then you're admissible to Cuban university, or other universities, I suppose, but certainly Cuban universities for the remaining bit of the 6-year program that you would be part of. So you start there, and it's designed to get you to a medical school, but the actual completed medical program happens elsewhere. But nevertheless, it was an incredible experience to be there. And what this meant is that we were going to take this research that we garnered and do several things with it. Number one, it was, we used it at least twice, I think. And I'm sure there was another at TICEP, but at the ACRO annual meeting, there were 2 presentations on Cuba based on this information and by the participants. And then we also started working on a Cuba Edge update that has now come to full flower. And then finally, there was this white paper that 4 of us worked on Besides me, there was Chris Adams of Indiana, Alex Morosky of Scalaro, and Martha Vandevender of ECE. And we pulled that together. And as Drew reminded me in our prep time, it did come out in 2020, of course, right in the middle of the pandemic. And I told him I couldn't remember when it had come out. And then when he told me 2020, I remembered, oh yes, it was during lockdown. I was at home working on this. And so now we're going to see what we can do with Edge Cuba based on this information that we've been able to pull together. And so it was an incredible experience. ACRO would like to do more of these, but we just need to see, as soon as we were done and before plans for another project could come up, pandemic hits, and we're only just now coming out of that. So we'll see what the future holds, particularly with Melanie as executive director now. She was not at that time, as you know, and very internationally minded herself. There could be some interesting things that develop along the way in matters of this kind of research. So, Drew, why don't I give it back to you? Or no, I'm passing it on, sorry, to Leslie.
Thank you very much, Robert. We started reviewing the Austria profile in EDGE as a result of a user question. We really welcome users writing in with their comments, questions, observations, because as you know, educational systems change fairly quickly. And so as soon as we publish something, the next day it's basically becoming out of date. So we really like to hear from EDGE users about these things. The question that was brought to us by a user was, you have two seemingly contradictory entries for the Magistra after bachelor's under the new system. One allows for a bachelor's only and the other for a master's. I believe it should be master's for a 120 ECTS credit master's degree and a bachelor's comparability for the other. Could you make this clear? So this launched a review, an in-depth review of how Austria looked, and just some background into that. This profile was actually written by me in 2007, and this was kind of at the dawn of the changes that the Bologna system brought to Europe. So things were not yet settled, and that is really reflected in the profile itself. And we realized as we were just addressing the user, thanks Natalie, the user's question, that really the profile needed an overall update, overhaul, and some clarification. And so that's what we're actually in the process of doing right now. We're looking at dividing the entries, clearly delineating them between the traditional system and the Bologna system. We're looking to update terminology, degree durations, and in general, the structure of the Bologna system in Austria versus the traditional system. By the way, the user's question, Natalie's question, she was right. We did have a discrepancy in the way we were looking at the degree of Magistra, and we will be addressing that. That will be part of this larger overhaul. So because this is a large revision, it won't be done overnight. It's October now. I'm hoping by the end of the year to have this completed and uploaded for users to be able to better do their work when they receive Austrian credentials. Now I'm going to hand it over to Jasmine.
Thank you, Leslie. Thanks so much for that. Here we go into Pakistan, and this is right now based on an article that I read that came out late last month in the Pakistan Express Tribune. And in that, they said that they are doing a complete overhaul of the grading system for the matriculation and the intermediate exams. And these are the exams that are offered at the end of their secondary cycle, which is a 12-year cycle. Currently on EDGE, we have a grading scale for Pakistan, but reading the information provided in the article in the paper, we also find that the grading scale that we currently have is not congruent with what Pakistan is currently having in place. So That's going to be reviewed. We are collecting samples of the current grading scales. So if anyone has some really good intermediate exam certificates or matriculation exam certificates for Pakistan, you wish to share, please make sure you redact the sensitive information and upload it for us. We'd love to have that so that we can prepare a grading scale for the current system. Now, as far as what is being proposed and being implemented, you see that on your screen. This new scale will address the grades in terms of A+, A minus, B+, B minus, C, D, and E. The current 6-point is the A1, A, B, D, and E, which does not match what we have on EDGE. So that's what we need to correct. As far as when is this new system going to be implemented, we do not know. But again, we will be on the lookout for if any new transcripts or matriculation certificates come through that show this scale. We will, at that point, we will definitely then upload that information and revise the grading system. But since it hasn't yet got into, it has not been enforced, we're not going to address that yet in EDGE, but we do have to correct what we have currently in place. Again, if you come across the new documentation, feel free to share with us, redact the sensitive information and upload it. But that's kind of how we stay in touch with what's going on around the world. We all have our kind of noses in every electronic news, magazine, digital archives of any sort. So again, if you have information that you'd like to share on the Pakistan's new grading system, please share it with EDGE, and we will then dive deep into it and continue with our research. So that's my update on Pakistan, a work in progress. Thank you so much. We're gonna now go back to Robert on Kazakhstan, and then I guess Shelby will also add some personal information. Thank you.
One thing that I was just going to jump in there before you got to go, Robert, I was just going to jump right in front of you in line. I was going to mention that that what you're seeing, all of this research that the IESC does take onto itself, all of these, well, I just like to point out, everyone's a volunteer. And so the more you can send in, the easier it is for everyone on this team to put all the heads together to really work on it with one another. Now, what I will also share with you is that ACRO does a lot of these news articles. We've got a few different robots and artificial intelligence that's scouring the web. And our colleague Jonathan is assembling all of that into the emergent news feature. It's on the home page of EDGE. It's on the overview page of every individual profile. And so when there are news articles that we've determined are valuable for you, maybe it's an update on a schedule for an exam. Maybe it is something that's going on just with some protests. Maybe some schools are closed for a natural disaster. Anything like that, check on that profile page, on that overview page, see if there's information that we've already assembled, or like I said, on that home page of EDGE for all those good news articles. Take it away, Robert.
Okay, Drew, thanks. As was the case with Leslie and Austria, the Kazakhstan issue came up with an EDGE from an outsider, an EDGE user, Alex Popovsky of Ukrado. And first of all, you know, Cyrillic is not an issue for Alex. He's originally he's of Macedonian extraction, did a marvelous entry, and it's up there now. So if you're wandering through EDGE and you want to find something really amazing, take a look at Macedonia. Alex did a fabulous job. And he brought in a question that asked, well, okay, I've got this diploma. And so I go into the Kazakhstan EDGE entry and I find, and I don't really find what I'm looking for. And I've got it up here, so I'm going to tell you what it literally shows right now before we get around to fixing anything or changing anything. And it is the Diploma of Specialized Secondary Education. and it's 2 to 4 years in length. And the reason for that is that with an 11-year system, it could be 2 years after complete secondary education, the 11 years, and thus 13, if you will, or it could be 4 after the incomplete secondary education of grade 9. And so what Alex was wrestling with was, why do we say in that entry, if that is indeed the entry he was looking for, and I'll get to that in a second, then why do we say completion of vocational or other specialized high school curriculum in the United States and not grant some credit for it? Either because it's 13 years, or what Alex pointed out was, if you go to Russia, and that of course is where a lot of the educational systems of these former Soviet republics all look a lot like the one in Russia, then you'll find that for a similar credential, that we have said that it's worth credit. If it's whether it's 2 years after 11th or whether it's 4 years after 9th, then, and really it's not in Russia, it's more like 4.5 or so, because what they do is they complete your secondary education and then they give you the specialization education that's designed to lead to a vocational qualification. Okay, so he's saying, why do you recommend credit for it in Russia, but a similar kind of diploma in Kazakhstan you're not recommending them? So I volunteered for that one and went in there and decided that Alex was right and we were wrong, at least originally 15 years ago or whenever, when we called it Diploma of Specialized Secondary Education. In fact, it should be called, and Alex sent this into it and I verified that by other sources, Diploma of Vocational Secondary Education. And in fact, within the last few years, that's actually changed to a different English translation of Diploma of Technical and Professional Education. Okay, so the first order of business was to let's get the title right. I also noticed that in the EDGE entry for specialized secondary ed, there's no Cyrillic. It's all in English, so we needed that. And we have it now, thanks to Alex and thanks to Chris Foley, who authored an ACRO publication on Kyrgyzstan not terribly long ago, and he's also been involved in some other ACRO presentations of the stands, as we call it. And so established the correct title. And then suddenly I realized, okay, we have another problem. Alex is only worried about Kazakhstan, but when you go in and start looking, you suddenly realize that this problem is magnified because you also have to look at Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan, in addition to kind of glancing at Russia at the same time. And so that's what I'm doing now. I've actually started working on a flow chart that puts all those countries across. And I'm only focusing on not the entire educational system, but just those professional, vocational, technical diplomas at about that point in the educational system, and trying to resolve any inconsistencies we have, or if there are not inconsistencies, if there's valid in-country reasons for them to be treated one way or the other, then we'll certainly embrace that. One thing, thanks to Dave Mihaly, we found as we began this discussion in our meetings was that there had been a law passed that made it clear that the Kazakhstan diploma of vocational secondary education, or now the Diploma of Technical and Professional Education, is not the same kind of credential as the Russian model from which it may have been derived once upon a time 30 years ago. And so we pinned that down, but there's still much more work to do to making these all consistent and even-handed. And so we're going to work on that. And I don't know how long this will take. I hope it doesn't take too long, but we do want to get to the bottom of it. Naturally, if anyone out there has some information on any one of those countries in this particular credential, love to hear from you. Alex not only asked a question, he provided a lot of great information from some original source digging that he did as well. So with that, it's time to return this to,
Well,
to
you
you,
know,
Drew.
well, so I was thinking before we left Kazakhstan, I really appreciate the tour that you're taking there, and you're going through and you're looking at this kind of credential in that region. But Shelby, can you give us a different
Yes.
kind of tour of that region?
Someone who's actually been there. Yes.
I certainly can. A few years ago, I had the privilege of recruiting in Kazakhstan in 4 major cities and visited a couple of their higher education institutions. One was a technical vocational school and one was a university. And while we were there, we stopped in the capital in Astana. And just to give you a little bit of color on Kazakhstan, they have a number of wonderful shopping facilities in the town, one of which is called Khan Shahar Mall. It's designed in the shape of a traditional Kazakh winter hat. If you look at it during the daytime, it kind of looks almost like a mountain with a big pole sticking out of the top. But when you get inside the mall, you can not only shop, but even in the dead of winter, you can come in your bathing suit and enjoy the white sandy beaches and beautiful Laguna type swimming pool. They've now also put in a floating river, which wasn't there when I got to go. And a little tip in case you're deciding to travel in January and February, it's one of the coldest places on Earth, outside of Antarctica or the Arctic Circle. And don't wear your glasses because they'll freeze to your face. Just a little tip.
Thanks for sharing that. Being a fellow, or not a fellow, I was going to say a fellow Kazakhstanian. No, being from Minnesota, I'm like, my winters are cold, but Shelby was talking about her experience and I was like, oh, sounds a lot colder that way. But thank you guys all for your contributions to the updates. And again, we really do encourage our users and our viewers to send us those redacted documents. Like Robert said, when you guys give us information and context, when you ask your questions, it really helps our team dive in and get to the answer a bit faster. But we're going to move on into highlights and upcoming events. And I'm actually really excited to share that on November 15th, in celebration of our upcoming International Education Week, we're going to be having a free webinar at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. So mark that in your calendar. You guys can also use that QR code as well to view all of our upcoming webinars. And this one is going to focus on what student-led campaigns at GW, where I actually went to school, and Georgetown University are being done. And so we're going to hear stories from students. We've got Emmanuel, Sean, Catherine, and Zachariah joining us from both respective institutions. And we're going to focus a lot on what they're doing on their campus, student-led, to promote those flexible admissions, to discuss the significance of the ESL program, and also to do an overview of what is the Welcoming Campus Initiative and how can you bring these ideas and these stories, and then, of course, the impact of what they're doing to your own institution. So I really hope to see you guys there. Again, please use that QR code to view all of our upcoming webinars. I don't believe it's posted quite yet, but you can use that QR code again to view it when it is posted. And I will pass the mic back on to Drew, who's going to talk about our new Ukraine profile page. Drew?
Thanks, Christina. So one of the things that that we have been trying to open up is lots of resources that might be timely. And not too long ago, there was an Acro Connect article. For anyone that doesn't subscribe to Connect, it's a free publication. If you want more information about what Acro is doing, it's more of a glimpse in as to the impacts that Acro is having. But there was a Connect article, and we talked about some of the various resources that we've assembled that you can use specifically when helping refugees or other displaced persons continue along their educational tracks. And in the spirit of that, we have opened up the Ukraine profile page. Now, to get to it, you would navigate just in a slightly different way than you would when you were logging into your regular Edge account for the 93% of you that are already Edge subscribers. But what you would do when you want to go in and look at this is for folks that aren't yet Edge subscribers. This is for folks that just want to do what they can to assist any of these Ukrainian students that are only trying to take their education and to to carry that with them on to the next, whatever the next trip is. So the Ukraine profile page has been opened up, and all of the credential advice is there for you. All of the grading scales are there for you. It's available for everyone. You don't need to be logged into Edge. But just one of those resources that we wanted to make sure people were aware of. Other resources that you should probably take advantage of. We've got on-demand learning series. So there was a question earlier about when is this webinar going to be published on the website. We get these up a couple of days after they're finished live. It has to be processed and stuck into the cloud. We shoot it over to the other side of the world and it flies back through the internet. But once it's up there, you can access all of the ACRO webinars. The archive's available. It's all free. You just got to log in, or you just got to give your email address so they can send you the login information so you can get into the old platform. But if you want to go a little bit deeper, I would encourage you to look at some of our courses that we have available on demand. There's the international series, is what we'll talk about today, since we're kind of focused on international issues here. There are a lot of different courses that'll allow you to dive deep into specific systems. Robert was discussing earlier how a lot of certain regions of the world follow that former Soviet system. We're going to talk about United Kingdom system. We're going to talk about India is something that I know a lot of you have questions on, and it's really complex. There's a lot of great information that you can do on your own time right in there. So it's available when you're available, and it's the kind of thing that you can get a credential associated with it, so you can demonstrate that you have that knowledge and take that with you. Lots of things to look at there with the ACRO On Demand series. Something to look into, but also don't forget those free webinars are available archived for you. What else we got, Christina? Oh, for you, you like doing research. I know that we all like to go down the rabbit hole. I know that we all like to, find the credential and see what the law was. And, that's part of our job. But it's exciting. We want to share that. Have you done something? Have you assembled something in your time that you love to talk about, that you just can't wait to share? Well, we want to help you publish that out and get that information put into the collective sphere of intelligence that we have here with all of us that are working in the international comparative education fields. Gloria R. Nathanson, her fund is designed to help get that published. So we're looking for you to help with full country profiles for specific issues that you've done that research on. White papers, we like it. You just need to go online, apply for this grant, and it's something that we want to encourage you with the work that you already love to do.
Awesome, thank you, Drew. And without further ado, I want to move into our Q&A section. But first, before we even jump and open the floor, I've noticed that Jennifer Party has had her hand up for quite some time. Jennifer, thank you so much for your patience. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And so if you have your question, you can go ahead and talk when you are ready. And if it was by any chance a mistake, I can't speak today. If it was by any chance a mistake that you raised your hand, not a worry at all, but please do use our chat function if you do want to ask a question or come off mute. Looking down at the Q&As, you'll notice that there have actually been a handful of questions already answered. Thank you so much, Leslie and Shelby and Jasmine, for going in there and answering questions. I encourage all of you guys who are viewing, to check those out. But I do want to start addressing questions that haven't been answered. Susan in the chat asked, so Kazakhstan is similar to post-secondary higher education for the vocational ed. Also, so we'll start with that one, sorry, because she asked two questions, but they're very separate. Sure,
I'll be glad to. The answer to that, Susan, is yes. Well, that's the whole crux of the issue, and if I wasn't clear on that, I really apologize. The basic was Soviet, and now still exists as as the Russian Federated Republic, but was that you had this vocational technical credential that you could get, qualification, so on, that was basically like an AAS or something along those lines. Supposedly you entered after you completed full high school, secondary education, that being the attestat, Osrednym Polnym Obrazovanie. And once you finish that, you would do a 2-year program, and then you would get this qualification, and we would all give credit for that. And we in fact say that in our Russian entry.
I used to work in the service industry, and we would wait around the corner until someone had a bite of food in their mouth to run out to ask. We wouldn't do that, not really.
So that's what we say. And the other thing, Susan, that's so complicated about it and it's tricky is that you could also enter, and still can in Russia, enter from the 9th grade. Your incomplete secondary education. In other words, instead of going on to do 2 more years and finish that attestat, you could enter this program. And there are certain kinds of schools called technikum or uchilicha, and you would do those, do 4 years, because they were going to make you do the secondary education you skipped by going straight to that program. So you get your finished secondary education and you got this qualification. And we would give 2 years of credit for that 4.5 year program. Okay. Then of course comes the breakup of the Soviet Union. And by 91, you have the 92, you've got the newly independent states. And so suddenly you've got Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Afghanistan's totally different, so that's why we don't include them. But those 4 former Soviet republics all had a very similar educational system. They just kept what they had during the Soviet times, and then just kind of put a national face on it, perhaps. And as Dave Mihaly learned with respect to Kazakhstan, what they had done was to actually pass a law that made a clear difference for that education and post-secondary education. So we were able to go back to Alex Popovsky, even though we're not finished with this research, because we now realize it's extended beyond Kazakhstan. But we were able to go back to Alex and say, Alex, we're even though we may even have the name wrong and we're going to get that right, we still don't recommend credit, that it's high school, vocational, technical graduation. And so what's going on now is trying to look at that similar type of diploma in those other 3 stands, and then to get all of that into EDGE, as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you, Robert. And I'm going to go ahead and bounce to Susan's next question. She's asking also, is there any info on what's happening in Peru? Nigerian college professors ended strike yesterday or the day before.
I suspect that's 2 different ideas, probably.
I believe so.
Yeah, because Leslie, earlier you answered a question that addressed something about what was happening with Nigeria. Would you like to talk about that just aloud for everyone that didn't see your answer written out?
Sure. It was just briefly, it was a snippet from an Al Jazeera article posted 6 days ago that talked about the lecturers suspending the strike, and there was still a question about when classes would begin again. And one of our attendees echoed that as well. So it was a very brief thing about Nigeria, but I had not heard anything about Peru. And so I would be interested to hear what the question asker meant about what's going on.
Yeah, so Susan, if you just want to elaborate a little bit further, we can come back around to that.
This is Jasmine. The only thing that I'm seeing on Peru, and there's probably more, is that there's some political conflict going on, and they're accusing the president of perhaps a coup. So,
And there's been some issues about them possibly wanting to get rid of Sunedu and
mhm,
the president not getting his way on that. And so
Mhm.
there's all kinds of turmoil, but there's nothing really clear, anything really clear about how that's actually impacting the higher
Correct.
education. So.
correct. But one thing I'd like to add is if anyone is keeping an eye on the situation in Iran, there are major protests going on, and the universities university students are striking and protesting. And we're talking about major universities such as University of Tehran, Sharif University, Al Zahra University, University of Mashhad, University of Shiraz. So, and going all the way down to elementary school students to secondary school students. So if those of you are dealing with students coming from Iran, whether in the US and Canada, just be prepared that there's going to be some issues with documents or lack thereof.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, Jasmine.
You're
I'm
welcome.
going to move on to Anna's question. And it says, I'm new to my position and find myself struggling with Ethiopian transcripts. Can you confirm that what we have on ACRO, is the most accurate information? The transcripts I'm seeing are not similar to what I see on ACRO.
Okay, well, let me begin, and I'm sure there are others that can, pick up the slack I leave. But basically, a couple of things. First of all, there's a report, I believe, that scanned the NOCUT report. This is the Norwegian accrediting and research body, and that they did a paper in 2015, I want to say, possibly even older, just slightly older than that. And they went to both Ethiopia and Eritrea, and they learned at the time that there was obviously some things going on. Degrees in Ethiopia were being downgraded by a year, so 5 becomes 4 for engineering, 4 becomes 3 in other fields and disciplines. And then all that changed a few years later. They went back to the original model. And supposedly we're not going to see any more of these truncated degrees, but in fact we did for a while. I don't know that we still do, but this is the sort of thing that causes confusion. The other thing that happened was that they began to change their secondary school leaving certificate exams at 10th and 12th grade. And we did address that in Edge Ethiopia because I remember working on it and getting confused so many times. Then I finally got it straight one day, quickly reported it to the group who approved it and put it in there. And then I'm sure I've forgotten it all since then. But of course, don't forget, we have another war going on, it appears. I don't know if literally there's still fighting going on. There was certainly a couple of months ago, and this can always create problems and issues and chaos between Ethiopian national government and the Tigray province and so on. So that we thought that was over for a while, but it started up again, evidently. That could cause issues and troubles.
Thanks for that, Robert. And I just want to encourage Anna to share the document with us that she has received. Just please redact it and upload it. We'd really appreciate that. We've tried to keep up with Ethiopia. It's undergone several changes as Robert has mentioned, but the sample documents may not match what the updates are. So we'd appreciate looking at that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And an anonymous attendee asked about the alarming reports with flash universities in Benin creating widespread non-accredited programs at accredited schools. And they're asking for more information on what to look out for to discern with more recent developments, oh my goodness, to identify these schools and programs that popped up during the ASU strike. I may have read that a bit funny. So I want to start with Benin, first of all. So they're asking about essentially how to ensure that the programs that people are applying for are accredited and how you would recommend going about that.
I have a comment about that, Christina. I would say that the most important thing to do when you're researching credentials like this is to refer to the the Ministry of Education or whatever body is governing higher education in that country, because Benin and Nigeria have a fraught history of problematic credentials and institutions. And so we always have to go back to the ministry sites. Beyond that, I don't know. I hadn't heard about a new upswell in fake programs, but a very interesting topic. And if the question asker has any more information that they'd like to share, maybe they'd be willing to unmute.
Yeah, unmuting would be a great way to clarify. I'm sorry for butchering the question. I didn't mean to do that. The second half, though, if I'm getting this right, they're asking, I would love more information on what to look out for to discern with more recent developments to identify these schools programs that popped up during the ASUU strike in Nigeria. And I would say, like, before I open the floor up to anyone else, is following those news stories that we post within Edge and just keeping an eye on different news that you see and also sharing those with us. Again, we can't say it enough, is when you guys find new information, we really appreciate when it's shared so that it can be public information and we can share it with everyone. But I'll pass the mic to somebody who might be able to answer that a bit more.
I just wanted to follow up on what Leslie said. I popped the name of the entity in Benin that's responsible for accreditation and recognition. And just a reminder that in Benin, it's programmatic recognition. It's not institution specific. So not only do you need to look for the institution, you need to make sure that the program in question is actually recognized, because if it's not, then you don't have the equivalent of an accredited degree.
So Shelby, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, there may not be a new wave of these unaccredited programs. It could just be existing programs at these schools, and the recognition, you got to get all the way down into that programmatic.
You have to drill down. Yep. And so the new schools that are popping up most likely are just operating without any sort of approval from the Ministry of Higher Education. So that's going to be an issue for us, I'm sure.
I would just note that Mark McLean mentioned that the Ethiopians changed the name of the secondary exam in 2021. He's absolutely right. That's what prompted my having to go in and mess with all of that. And what's really difficult about it is they're also closely named. The new name is very closely aligned with the old name with a couple of words different. And that's what can make the whole thing so terribly confusing and so forth. But thank you, Mark, for that point. As for the Nigerian strikes and so forth, we've begun to get a little of it here at UT Austin, where I've had my evaluators come in and ask, what should we, we're at bar season, right? This is the time when people who are barred their next registration have to produce their final documents, or else, they don't get to register again. Or we temporarily lift it for yet another semester, and at some point they escape, and we have egg on our face, never having gotten the document. When it's only come up once so far, said, I went in, I saw immediately that was true, that there were strikes going on, and I surmised that if you didn't get out with that document, or if you didn't bring that document with you when you came to UT Austin, and there's a strike back there, the odds are you're not going to be able to get it. So in that case, I think I okayed a temporary one semester lift of that, hoping that it will get over, or that the individual can get if there's a copy at home, official copy at home, they could get that in the meanwhile, or something along those lines. But it does create chaos in our offices when, something like that happens and they simply can't get the documents. Conversely, if I can throw this in, the question came up with someone from Russia that said, due to the situation, I can't get my documentation. And I said to our guys, no. Ukraine, maybe. Russia, no. The Ukrainians, for whatever reason, well, I know what strategic political reasons, but the Ukrainians are refraining from any sort of bombardment of Russian cities and towns and so forth. And so there's no reason not to assume that you can get documentation from Russian institutions today. All right.
And just as a follow-up, a couple of our colleagues from Canada gave a session a couple of years ago at a conference on Francophone Africa recognition and demystifying how to interpret and understand that. I put a link to their slide deck in the chat. It's really excellent. It goes over several countries in Africa, and it might be helpful.
Shelby, is this the one where they talk about how Bologna came to Africa, even though of course,
Let me double check.
that was a TICEP, I think.
Yeah, this was a TICEP one, but I think this is just specifically about the recognition. There's a there's a different session that was specifically on Benin and Senegal that talks about the LMD reforms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Robert, I just wanted to go back to what you mentioned about Russia. I may have missed it. Are you saying that you are encouraging your Russian students to get the official documents directly from the institutions?
Right. Right now, unless I've got primary evidence that they cannot,
right,
then, I want them to get it.
Because I attended, I think it was a TICEP webinar a couple of weeks ago, and Eric Johansson
Yeah, I just saw him
saw
him in Groningen.
Right, and he was talking about Russia, and it seemed as though because of these sanctions, it's becoming more and more difficult, even though the institutions are standing and they want to be of service, but there's this sort of reluctance. He made it sound as though just even reaching out to the Ministry of Education is not as easy as it used to be, because he represents a branch of the government. So government to government is not going to be easy, but perhaps institutions to institutions, but I'm not quite sure.
That's what we
don't quote me on this, but I'm kind of going with what I remember from that TICEP webinar.
Well, that's interesting. I may email Eric to get the latest from him.
Yeah, I would say he just seemed very despondent about.
I can understand government to government, especially Sweden right now.
Exactly. But we're in the US too, so we don't have the most affable relations.
One of the reasons I say what I say and take the conservative viewpoint is that it's usually not. I mean, he's government. He may be looking for information, and they may not even pay attention to Robert Watkins at the University of Texas at Austin. But if Oleg, whomever, asks for his transcript, and or gets his parents to ask for it, and there's no reason ostensibly that they couldn't get it.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking if they're being drafted and they're skipping.
Oh, well, that's true.
There's a lot going on. I just don't know.
So Robert and Jasmine, y'all really bring up like an excellent point about how conditions can change, and it's important to incorporate that new information once we have it. We're not going to make that mistake anymore. So it's great to have your established policies that you can point to so that you can be consistent when you're dealing with all these students. And once you realize that something needs to change, it is appropriate to make that decision and implement that moving forward. So it sounds like, that's what Robert and Jasmine are trying to figure out. What is the correct thing to implement moving forward?
Agreed.
Well, is there anything else that we were going to talk about today, Christina? I really appreciate you getting all those QR codes up there so that if people wanted to get their phones out, take a screenshot of this, this is something that would, just go ahead and allow them to get some of this information more quickly. But anything else you wanted to talk about today? We've got, 60, 90 seconds left?
I think that's it. Shelby, I appreciate you putting your email in the chat just to answer that last question, because we are about 30 seconds out from the end. But again, on behalf of ACRO, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon to be with us and to engage in conversation, ask your questions. We are looking forward to seeing you, hopefully at that webinar on November 15th, and then again for our Edge user group in November. And again, to our IESC members as well, thank you guys for being here. We greatly appreciate the work that you guys do.
Thank you.
See y'all on the third Thursday. See y'all on the third Thursday.
Thank you very much. Take care, everybody.